about how to use the first conditional. And this is going to be the first in a series that we're going to be looking at in this block. We'll be looking in the next few weeks at kind of all the other conditionals. But what I wanted us to think about, first of all, is why we use conditionals. Okay, what is the purpose of a conditional structure? So I find with my students that what usually happens is that people get really obsessed with how to construct conditionals, and we lose focus on what they actually mean and what we are using them for. Okay, so if we don't think about the pragmatics of these structures, right? So the pragmatics means like the function that they are serving. What does that structure represent in terms of the language? You're never ever going to be able to use conditionals correctly, right? If you keep just focusing on how you put them together. So we're really going to think today about the function of them. And there are 4 different kinds of conditionals. Each of these have different functions. Some are used much more commonly than other structures, but we are going to focus today on the first conditional. And another thing as well with conditionals to say is that the way that we use conditionals in kind of more natural speak, in more natural spoken English, is actually very different to the kind of common structure that you always learn in your grammar books. Okay, so we're going to have a look at the first conditional today, and we're going to have a look at all of the different ways we express it as well. And we're also going to have a think about the pronunciation aspects related to the first conditional too. First of all, why do we use a first conditional? What is the purpose of a first conditional? What is it expressing? So a conditional, any kind of conditional, will always have a condition. What a surprise, okay? It's in the name. So what that means is that there's always going to be 2 aspects to a conditional, yeah? We will always have a situation, and then we will have a consequence or a condition, right, of that situation. So this thing will happen on condition of this other thing. Yeah. And in terms of the first conditional specifically, we're using that to talk about possible or likely situations which are happening now or in the future. Yeah. So it's representing a present or a future aspect. So if I give you an example, guys, if this is my situation, have time, okay, that's my possible situation, and do the shopping is the likely consequence of this situation, if I put that together into a sentence, yeah, it'll look a bit like this. So we'll have our 2 clauses. The situation will be expressed with the if clause. I'm saying the if clause, but it's not always the if, right? But we're going to call it the if clause just to make life a little bit easier. And then we have our consequence clause, which you can think about that as the auxiliary clause, because we need to use an auxiliary to express that, okay? And the auxiliary we use can vary a lot, okay, which we'll have a look at today as well. So if I use the commonly taught conditional structure, which if I ask you how you form a conditional is probably what you'll tell me, yeah? We would probably use if with the present simple to talk about the situation, and will plus an infinitive to talk about the consequence. Yeah? Does that look familiar to you? It's probably what you've seen in like a million English textbooks, okay? So if I have time, my situation, I'll do the shopping, the consequence. So this is a very likely and possible thing that's going to happen now or in the future. However, there are lots and lots of different ways that we can actually express a possible or likely situation now or in the future. So here are some examples for you. Yeah. If I finished work by 5 p.m., I'm going to go to the gym. If he's running a marathon, he must be really fit. I might do some work if I'm feeling better. If you finish by 4 p.m., I can help you. If he's been working all day, he's going to be exhausted. So what I'd like you to just think about for a second, I'll give you a minute, guys, to just consider this. I'd like you to think about what you notice about these sentences, okay? What structures we're using, right? And what kind of auxiliaries we're using as well, right? So have a little look at the words on the screen. Take a second to consider them, okay? And then we'll have a look together at what structures we're using. So let's have a look together then. So I've highlighted here all of the big variety of language that we've used to express these possible or likely situations, yeah? If we look at the first one, you'll see that in the situation clause, we're not using present simple, we're using present perfect. And in our auxiliary clause, we're not using will, we're using going to. In the second example, instead of present simple, we're using the present continuous. And in my auxiliary clause, I'm actually using a modal verb here. Yeah, I'm using must to talk about speculation. In the second example, I've also got a speculative modal here in my consequence clause instead of the verb will, the auxiliary will, sorry. And in my situation clause, I've got the present continuous again, not the present simple. And in this example, in my auxiliary clause, I'm actually using can instead of will. And in the last example we've got here, guys, I'm using the present perfect continuous, and in the consequence clause, I'm using going to. Yeah. So we're using a really wide range of language here. And this range of language is giving all of these sentences slightly different meaning. A slightly different aspect, right? Slightly different pragmatics to it, right? So for example, if he's running a marathon, that to me tells me that it's an action which is in progress. It's not completed. He's doing it now, and he must be really fit, gives this one a speculative consequence of that, okay? So all of these are giving slightly different pieces of information. A better way to think about how you're constructing a first conditional would be like this, yeah? In my situation clause, I'm going to use if with present aspect, okay? Not present simple. So I can use any kind of structure which is going to express present aspect. So that could be, like the examples we've seen there, present perfect continuous, present continuous, yeah? We can have lots of different ones depending on what we want to express. And in my consequence clause, I'm using future aspect with an infinitive. So that means anything that's going to give an aspect about the future, such as can, which is a modal verb for future possibility, such as going to, which is used to talk about predictions, or such as might or must, which is used to speculate about the future, right? So all of those are possible ways that you can structure a first conditional to express a possible or likely situation now and in the future. I keep repeating this, right? A possible situation now, likely now or in the future, because I really want us to think about what the first conditional is for, yeah, the purpose of it. That's what that structure is going to represent. And if we come back to that if thing here that I said before, quite often that if won't be there either because we can use other words to express it. Now have a look at these examples. When I finish the dishes, I'll help you with your homework. As soon as I finish the dishes, I can help you with your homework. I'm going to help you with your homework after I finish the dishes. Before I go home, I might finish this report. I won't go home until I finish this report. While I'm waiting for the bus, I'll drink my coffee. I'll contact you once I receive an estimate. You'll be notified the minute your order arrives. It'll be dark by the time we arrive home. Okay, so all of these structures here, right, in that classic conditional structure that we talked about before, all of these words in bold are replacing the word if. Yeah, so for example, if I finish the dishes, I'll help you with your homework. If I go home, I might finish this report. If I'm waiting for the bus, I'll drink my coffee. Okay? So in all of these cases, we're replacing the word if. with one of these words. Now, these words are what we call future time clauses. Yeah. And future time clauses, it's a bit of a scary grammar word. It really isn't that complicated. What a future time clause does is it just says that an event is going to happen at a certain time. Okay, that's the purpose of a future time clause. It's nothing particularly complicated. And also, although we call them future time clauses, we actually form them with present aspect. So if you look at these examples, while, okay, here's my future time clause, while I am waiting for the bus. So I'm going to use the present continuous in that example. Or here, I'll contact you once I receive an estimate. So here again, we've got present aspect. Yeah. The future aspect is being expressed in my consequence clause, not my situation clause. Okay. So these are all of our future time clauses. What I really recommend doing with future time clauses is actually spending a little bit of time with a very good bilingual dictionary and translating them into your language, because that's the way that you're going to have the clearest idea of the time that they're representing. But please make sure that you're using a good one, okay? And that if possible, you can find some nice examples from corpus just to make sure that those translations are correct. So are these commonly used structures, do you think, these future time clauses? Is this something that we use a lot in English? So I suppose the question is really, how often do you talk about time? And I think the answer to that is probably quite a lot. Yeah, especially depending on how you work, how you use your English, but especially if you work in English, and especially if you work in English in a business English environment where you're doing lots of meetings and things. These words are going to come up a lot when you're talking about scheduling or planning or organization, right? You will be using them all the time. So if that is how you're using your English, these are definitely words that you need to make sure that you're confident with and that you can use appropriately, because you'll use them again and again. Okay, so they will definitely come up quite a lot and are important to know. And the other thing, guys, that we need to remember is the pronunciation, right? So this is very important, this pronunciation. We've talked about this before. We're just going to do a quick revision of it. So the pronunciation of going to, when we use it in our blocks of sound, remember, when I speak quickly, going to, it's one of these connected speech features where we say gonna instead of going to. Yeah. So I'm gonna give up. Okay, I'm going to give up. I'm going to give up eating burgers if I can. Yeah. And if you were going to put it in a question, it would be the same block of sound. What are you going to give up? So remember, it's going to plus the infinitive verb that creates your block of sound. Okay, you can try repeating it with me, guys. I'm going to give up eating burgers if I can. What are you going to give up? Okay, so we want to be sure that we're using this this form of pronunciation. And the other one, which is important, is how we're pronouncing will. So I've given you lots of alternatives in a first conditional structure to will, but will is an incredibly commonly used one. Yeah, you'll still be using it a lot if you're making these structures, and of course in general. And remember that when we talk about will, we have to contract will with the subject. So if we're using pronouns, it would look like this, okay? And remember that in terms of written contractions, we only contract on subject pronouns, not on proper nouns. So this one here, guys, you can repeat it with me. I will becomes I'll. Yeah. So if we think about our block of sound, for example, with the word go, it would be I'll go. You will go, you'll go. He will go, he'll go. She will go, she'll go. It will go, it'll go. We will go, we'll go. They will go, they'll go. Okay? And I said before, we only contract on the subject pronoun when we write in English, but in spoken English, remember that you're always contracting that auxiliary when you're speaking on your subject. So, for example, if I say this sentence slowly, if she does not hurry up, Claire will be late. So I wouldn't make a contraction here because that'll look horrible, right? Look how horrible that looks. Claire will be, ugh. Yeah. I wouldn't do that in my written English. However, I will do it in my spoken English, right? So it'll sound like this. Claire will be late, not Claire will be late. Yeah. So if I say all of that sentence quickly, if she doesn't hurry up, Claire will be late. So, things that we want to think about summarizing from here. Yeah, we need to make sure that we're aware that conditional structures are not just the common if with present simple and will plus infinitive that we learn over and over again in textbooks. There's lots and lots of different ways that we can produce it, and we need to focus on this idea of present aspect and future aspect. Okay, and remember, future aspect can include modals as well for future speculation and possibility. So that's one way that we're the way that we're forming it. The other way that we very, very often use this structure is with our future time clauses, especially when we're talking about organization and scheduling. So if you're using English in any kind of business English format, like in a meeting or planning, this is language that you're going to use all the time, and it's important language for you to be confident with and make sure that you understand what these future time clauses mean. And finally, the most important thing, we have to think about the pragmatics of these structures. Why do I use a first conditional? It's not just to tick a box on my list of grammar structures that I'm familiar with. It's so that I can express possible or likely situations now and in the future. Okay, so in a couple of weeks, we'll be looking at the second, third, and mixed conditionals and doing a review of conditionals. But that's where we're going to stop for today.